Billy and Charlie, how are we today?
Doing well.
Terrific.
Hope you are.
I'm doing good. And don't worry, we'll make this three-way conversation very enjoyable. We can see each other, so I'll make sure that you guys aren't talking over each other. I've done it plenty of times. But I want to tee it up to you, Billy, because you've been on the show, and I really enjoyed our conversations, and it was an interesting time when you were on talking about the different things going on in the market from capital and who's doing what. But we're taking a totally different lens today. So why don't you just give us, again, a little bit of your background, and then we'll tee it up over to you, Charlie. You can do the same. And then, I don't know, Billy, if you want to kind of talk about, you even just introduce why you thought this would be a good conversation, because I think that was what instigated everybody to be on this call right now.
Yeah. So thanks, Ryan. I've been an investment banker and an investor for a long time. You know, I've seen all different kinds of companies, all different kinds of styles for leadership, different best practices. And I really thought that this was a good conversation for us to have, because out of really all the companies that I've worked with, Kontek Industries, which is the company that Charlie is at the head of, it has some interesting facets to it. One, that they're in a pretty niche industry, which is force protection for mission critical assets. But then the other is just like the astoundingly low turnover, and the way that Charlie, who I've known for a while, how he makes his employees feel and gives them an environment to really thrive. And especially with, the whole debate about, come back to office or don't. And with the labor market, being tough for lots of different companies, I think it's very timely. So
I was going to say, I'm excited to tee this up with you, Charlie, because Billy and I last time, we were just deep in the numbers, right? And the numbers end up there because of people. So I think that this is very relevant and the other side of the coin. So I'm very excited as well. So Charlie, why don't you just give us and the listeners just a kind of a flyby, and then we can unpack the topics like Billy was talking about.
Sure. So on the topic of management style, how to keep people engaged, how to keep people retained, we kind of center on the idea of trying to really put employees into the ownership experience where they feel like owners, they get treated like owners, and, we're here to serve, but we look for outstanding employees and then treat them outstandingly well.
That's awesome. And that topic right there, I think, has got a lot of meat on the bone, because I think a lot of people are struggling with just that, or trying to figure out how to do that better. For the listeners, let's talk. Why don't you give us a little bit of a background of what the business does, kind of your start in the business, like how did you become an entrepreneur, and then kind of the overall structure, and then we can get into how you figured out that this is the way to operate.
So our business has gone through 2 cycles. In the first cycle, which started back in 1990, I started with essentially a bankrupt company that made concrete buildings for cellular telephone companies. So we had 100-some-thousand square foot plant. We made precast concrete buildings, shipped them all over the place. Took me about 10, 12 years to really get the company out of the hole. And then the internet bubble burst. And suddenly the demand for basically infrastructure to build out the internet collapsed. So we did a pivot, and we went to our local congresswoman and said, "Hey, we've got a lot of employees here, and we'd like to find something for them to do. And our industry basically has collapsed." So our congresswoman, took that challenge on, got us eventually $5 million of grants.
Whoa.
And we did a whole redo of the company to address, creating products to protect against terror attacks. So we basically started the company from zero, and we've grown it in a lot of directions, and it's a totally new company today.
Like you said right before we hit record, there's probably a lot of discussions underneath the Billy smiling. And so I'm very excited to continue this conversation. But before the listeners, why don't you explain your guys' relationship, how you guys met, and what you guys are doing today? Bill, you want to take that one?
Yeah, sure. So Charlie and I met an organization called Vistage, which I'm sure, Ryan, you're familiar. For the listeners that aren't familiar with it, though I imagine many of them are, it's a peer advisory group. So CEOs from different industries, get together in these local chapters. We process issues, and we generally kind of act as each other's advisors. So that's where we met, and the initial prompt for me working in an official capacity with Charlie was to understand from Charlie's perspective how to make the company more valuable and think about it from a valuation standpoint, and think about different ways to leverage the assets that they had, whether it's from financial hard assets, or whether it's intellectual property or things like marketing methodology, things like that. And that's it's evolved into kind of a general financial advisory role across different areas, as I've gotten to know the business quite a bit since then. You think that covers it, Charlie?
I think so. We've probably been talking 3-4 times a month for an hour at a bite, and have developed a great relationship.
So Charlie, let's go to, I think about that turnaround, and you talk about the people and the kind of the topic you teed up.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure it's been through this cycle or this evolution of how the people became front and center for you. Where did this how did that become this part of your DNA of how you're running the business and what you guys stand for?
Well, I was lucky to have an incredible mentor who was my grandfather. And in the early phases of Kontek, in the old, in the turnaround that we did before the financial crisis, the .com burst, I learned a lot from him. And he was a big proponent of servant leader, and also treating people and talking to people in a very respectful way. And I think that kind of set me off on the journey of realizing that it's okay to have people working for you that are smarter than you. It's okay to have, people air views that are not consistent with what maybe I would say.
Mm-hmm.
And he also taught me the Socratic method, which I think is incredibly powerful, which, he said, as the leader, if you're giving your opinions, you're killing the conversation. So rather than give opinions, ask people for their opinions, and, act as a moderator as opposed to a leader. And I've kind of adopted that approach where I try not to give my opinions at all, simply because at the moment you give your opinion, you've killed the conversation as a leader, So
I love how you're describing that. When you say kill the conversation, maybe give an example of
So my grandfather told me, he was the CEO of a Fortune 200 company. He said, at the moment I say, I think blank, the meeting's over. He's like, everyone agrees. So he's like, never do that. Because the moment you say, I think blank, everyone quits thinking and agrees with you.
Mm-hmm.
So, I took that to heart. And I think you can ask strong questions and pull out, as a practical matter, everybody in your company should know more about what they're doing than you should know. If you have the right people sitting around you,
mm-hmm.
Each one should know more about their area than you know. So the trick is to pull out their knowledge and make a soup that that people want to eat.
Ryan, it's really nuts. Like having a wife that was in management consulting at PwC, the amount of fees that people pay just to have the consultants basically reaffirm when the CEO says, I think we should do X, is just unbelievable.
Yes, you should, Billy. Good for you. Yes.
It's just unbelievable how much work gets done by consulting firms just to reaffirm once the management team has said, I think we should do this.
So, and I think because I agree with you guys wholeheartedly, and I'm curious, Charlie, there's the thing of intellectually knowing that and then doing it. Cause like, it's kind of like with people who are like, hey, smoking's stupid, but I still do because I'm addicted and it's easy to keep going, versus doing the hard work to do what you know is actually the right thing and then actually embody it. Did you watch your grandfather see this work? Like, where did you see it work, or did you have any? Okay. You got the question. Yeah.
He was about 100% on it. In fact, I only learned about the Socratic method because I said, why don't you ever say what you think?
That's awesome.
And he said, well, the moment I do, the meeting's over. So he's like, I'll never do that. And I'm like, okay. So, and then once I heard that, then I watched that he would ask questions that would really pull from them. What if this were to happen? Or if we did that and this happened, how would we counter that? Or how would we live through that? And he would make them go through the thinking process, but he would pull rather than push the conversation.
What did that do for responsibility and ownership of the discussions that were being had?
I think it's let's do a simple exercise. I think we should kill all the grass and put rocks in, and I think you should do it. How committed are you to that?
Right. First of all, I'm the little kid that would always go, why?
Right.
Why?
But the thing is, if I asked you, I said, hey, Ryan, let's make the yard look better and give me some ideas as to what we can do to make it look better. And also help me figure out what it would cost. And if you could work with the team to give me a mock-up to see it, I would really appreciate that. So after you go through all that and you bring it to me and we, through an iterative process, figure out, okay, we're going to lock in on this. But essentially now this is your idea. How committed are you to fulfilling it and making it go?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Like full commitment. Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
As opposed to my idea of kill the grass and put rocks in.
What do you think
you're like, heck no, I don't want to do that.
That sounds stupid, Charlie. Like, don't we want grass? Yeah. Like,
right.
What is the challenge or hesitation or fear do you think people have in doing what you just described?
Before we move on, I think one of the key distinctions that we have to make there is that imagine that the landscaping company is a direct report and has no other customer.
Right. Sure.
Because the paycheck's coming from
exactly.
You.
If it's that kind of relationship, then the impetus is, okay, the boss wants this, let's do this.
In my experience, people are more committed to their idea than they would ever be committed to my idea. So the trick in life is to figure out how to get a good outcome with your idea. Right.
And Ryan, one of the things that gets interesting there is it's the same when you're negotiating an LOI or a term sheet. You're way more likely to go from LOI to term sheet with the same terms if the deal was the buyer's idea, if the terms were the buyer's idea.
Really, that's the key to business, is to figure out how to get the other person to come up with your idea as their idea.
And so here's, agreed with you guys, and I love it. And actually, I had years ago, I think before Chris Voss was as well known as he is now, he was actually on the podcast and never split a difference.
I'm almost finished with that book.
Yeah, I mean, he would steal your spouse and your kids, and you would go, "Thank you."
Yeah, exactly.
But it's that trick, Charlie, of like, it's your idea, and that's how he's got his process behind it. So I think one of the things that I've seen with leaders, and I'm absolutely guilty of it myself, is it's pretty clear, especially if you're a visionary, you're a leader, you're more on the visionary side as well. When you have a rough idea or a clear idea of what you want, how do you then, without pushing and projecting what you want, give that breadcrumb trail in a way that actually results in the outcome you guys just described.
So I don't even know that I would agree with your premise.
Okay.
Our company is largely built on other people's ideas. And I'm not kidding. Because what we're doing is really not in my wheelhouse, but the people that I had in the crew, were concrete and steel people, and we had to convert the business into something else. And, we did a lot of roundtable as to, okay, what the hell do we do now that our existing business doesn't exist anymore? And it kind of went through an iterative process, and we landed on, 9/11 happened shortly after. And it's like, let's figure out how to protect facilities against acts of terror. And we got the congresswoman engaged on that, but that was not my idea. That was not my vision. Really, my partner, who's since retired, that was his vision. And I said, I think it's a good idea. Let's go with it. Let's do it. Quite honestly, the company is still run that way. We like to hear, what do customers want? What do they need? And if it feels like there's a market, we'll address it and come back with a solution. But it really is not built on my vision. It's really built more on my listening than my seeing or saying.
Totally makes sense. And I totally understand the pushback. And so let's say, and Billy, interesting to hear on your lens on this too. So Charlie, by the way, I totally agree with this type of leadership, and I don't embody it as well as I will hope I could, but because my business partner, Matt Buskirk, is like a magician at what you're talking about. And I look at it, watch him go, I'll never be like that. So you can go ahead and have that CEO job. But like what I think, Charlie, when I watch with our clients or the entrepreneurs I speak to, is there's a higher degree of this dynamic where the founder was the technician, was the HVAC, the plumber, the architect, the designer, the home remodeler, whatever it was, where it's very difficult for them to decouple because they were actually the product at one point, part of the cost of goods sold, maybe even compared to someone like yourself, where I saw like in a time of crisis, the human brain actually opens up the prefrontal cortex to have new ideas because of it's a time where it's necessary. I'm not taking away from your style there. I'm just curious of like, and maybe from either of you, like Billy, where you see like, hey, because a private equity firm can come in, and when they don't have those relationships and they're not the one that did the job, they're like, oh, well, now I can do all the things that should have been done, lead maybe the way that I should have, because they don't have that myopic expertise. Is the question making sense? I'm just wondering if that's a challenge it's another factor of another challenge of trying to, pull ideas out when because they might actually have that clear vision because they were the technician, the expert.
So from my perspective, life is funny because you have an idea and you roll it out, and it either sticks the way you hope it does, or in some cases it sticks in a way that you don't even imagine. But in our case, that's really more what happened. We thought we were going to build barrier systems for the State Department. We went and got tested. We did full-on automobile crashes into our barriers. We passed. General Dynamics did the test. So they're pretty credible folks. And that day, the State Department changed the standard, and then we learned the competitors actually were people who left the State Department to get after the job of putting barriers around State Department. So it was a rigged game. So interestingly, which is kind of the weird pivot, is at the same time 9/11 happened, nuclear power plants had to put barriers around their facilities by mandate. Government mandated it. We actually had the testing to show that we could do exactly what they required. And boom, we did $12 million of business, all delivered on the same day. But we didn't have in our imagination addressing the nuclear power plant business. We thought we were going to go after the State Department business, but there's some serendipity that what we did fit something entirely different than what we aimed at.
How did that idea percolate to the top, given your team and how you guys would converse?
Well, again, we're, concrete and steel company. So 9/11 happens. We're like, okay, we
Yeah,
need,
pretty relevant.
Yeah, we need to figure out things that can protect facilities. The biggest thing in a blast, an explosion, is the closer the explosion is to the target, the worse the damage. So what you want is to have the threat separated from the target. So, we built a concrete barrier system which would literally stop a fully loaded semi. Which the engineering force of a fully loaded semi onto a barrier system is really just unbelievable.
The 5-year-old kid in me wants to participate in all of your testing on the way to figuring that out.
If you want to go to Kontek Industry Day and you're down there, they blow stuff up.
Oh, we do it.
They shoot stuff with a 50 cal rifle. They blow stuff
awesome.
up, man. It's great.
It's something else. But anyway, we just figured, okay, we can do concrete and steel, and let's figure out how we can apply that to a new need, a new market. We figured, after 9/11, anti-terror is pretty big. We actually got a job with the military to put barriers around all the Reagan era shut down nuclear bombs. They just separated it so they couldn't be shot. But the military suddenly freaked out and said, "Holy cow! If there was an organized attack against our storage facilities, do we have enough delay time for the military base to respond against the terrorists?" They did some studies on that. There was a Senator Reid, not Harry Reid, but from I think Rhode Island, and he asked the government to do testing, and they said, "No, we don't have enough delay time." Sandia Labs did the analysis out in Albuquerque, and we got a several $1 million job making barriers to put in front of the storage facilities. And that was our first foray into this. And then we're like, okay, what else can we do with this? And we figured, okay, let's stick with this barrier idea. So there's a little bit of serendipity. My grandfather bought a company called Farranon for something close to $50 million. And, there was a single owner. He got a check for $50 million. And he was asked to give a graduation speech. And, he said, "I'd like to look at you guys and tell you that it's all about, working hard and carrying a vision forward." And he said, "Now that I'm much older," he said, "that's only half of it." He said, "The other half is ignorance, and luck, and in the entrepreneurial experience, you have to have a little luck so something catches fire, and you have to have a little ignorance because very little that entrepreneurs do really makes a whole lot of sense."
Amen, Charlie. Amen to that.
Yep.
Something's got to catch fire, and most of the time, it's got a little bit of luck attached to it.
So, and Billy, I want to come back in just a second, but I want further clarification for Charlie. But I do want to hear your perspective when you're looking at some other companies. But Charlie, when you're having those conversations, you're bubbling up the ideas from your team. What is, as the leader, then as the moderator and the facilitator, using your words, how do you figure out what might be a good idea? How do you spark that debate? And then how do you finalize a decision and let everybody else know that their idea was respected, but not the final outcome?
Well, it usually comes from a simple question like, if we wanted to grow the company, what do you think we could do? And most people have at least one idea to that question. So you start with that. Generally, something percolates up that, okay, this seems like an idea. Now, the other thing I think is test it out small. Don't bet the farm on the idea. Let's do one. Let's put it in front of a customer. let's see if we can sell it. So we do things that way. So my Vistage leader calls it being like intrapreneurial. So allow your people to have some cash to try to do something. And if it catches fire, you put more cash to it. So we allow, I'll give you an example. So my guys said that let's do wall systems that are modular, and let's have them so they're light and easily connected and disconnected. And let's go after the police training of urban assault. And my feeling, which I kept to myself, was that's a lousy idea. I thought that's crazy. So I'm like, okay, guys, what does it cost to try this out? And we went to the local sheriff department, 10 miles down the road. And we said, hey, they told me we could do a modest one for like $20,000. I'm like, okay, fine. Let's do it. Let's take it over to the local sheriff's department. Let's set it up on his yard. Let's see if he likes it. Well, hell if he didn't buy it. We've probably sold 50 or 60 of them since. They're usually $100,000. So, but I had the willingness to say, let's put $20,000 to that, what I thought was bad idea, and let's see if it floats. And
then now let's think about how jazzed are the guys that came up with that idea and that are now running that product.
I got excited in my stomach. I got excited for them. And because and I know this is tied into, Billy, when you and I were having our other call, is trying to get the autonomy, the people that want autonomy, but they also want a bigger vision too. So they don't want to be told 100% what to do, but they also don't want complete autonomy with no vision. So it's this balance back and forth. And as we, probably get into the remote working, some of the other stuff that will probably come up again. But before we do, Billy, I'm curious in your observations when you're looking inside of companies, because I've got similar experiences where you see there's all the financials, and then you look at the people, and then you look at the leader, and then you kind of ripple. You can see it down through the culture. The way that Charlie is describing his leadership compared to other companies where you'll go in there, how do you assess the differences and the contrast of, a different type of leadership style? And how do you see that manifest?
So it really, it comes down to really day-to-day interaction, stance, and really just the number one thing that tells me whether or not I'm dealing with a good leader is what's their reaction or on their face and in their body posture when I ask them so talk about what do you think you do well as a leader? That's typically what happens there. In terms of if I'm actually there in person, it's usually there should be a lot more time when the leader is with everyone else than apart.
Super fascinating.
There's also if I'm asking a company for different info or financials or anything else, the number one indicator for me, if that's all that I have to go off of for the leadership aspect, is let me get you to the right people. And then just if they then do that and then basically say, hey, you talk to these people for this, that's their area where he or she the leader doesn't have to have oversight or whatever. So it's those little things that imply trust and things like that. So that's how I look at it.
And I think about there's two things that come right to mind about this dynamic where it's exponentially upwards or exponentially downwards. It's almost like there's no neutral, because I think about the two topics are Charlie, I'm curious on how less stressful it is being a leader like this compared to the opposite of trying to hold the whole thing together by yourself. How does that manifest in your level of stress?
So I guess everybody in part has a dream speech in them. So my dream has been to not be needed as a CEO.
I love it. I love it so
Which
much.
consequently makes the valuation skyrocket.
And probably an easier job.
So I do everything in my power to not be needed. Now, so you might ask, how do you do that? Which is kind of an interesting question. One, you pay people a lot more than anybody else would. Truly.
Mm-hmm.
Also,
that's standard across most of the organizations that have these things in common.
So then the second thing is, if we do well, write big bonus checks at the end of the year. We wrote $600,000 of bonus checks for 20 people this year, right? So, we don't BS about that. And when that happens several years in a row, when people get bonus checks that are near equal to their annual pay, they're instantly wanting to feel like an owner.
Mm-hmm.
So if somebody's screwing up, I typically don't have to do a damn thing. They will do it. They will say, hey, you're screwing up. You're going to cost me my bonus. Stop doing that. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and interestingly, I learned that from my granddad. My granddad did a tour of a company called Lincoln Electric, which is one of the premier welding machine companies. And he got a tour, and he's like, the feeling I get walking through is unbelievable. My granddad told the CEO of Lincoln Electric. He's like, people they all have smiles. They like what they're doing. They're working hard. I don't see anybody goofing off. And he said, you must really work hard to achieve this kind of atmosphere. He said, no, quite the contrary. He said, typically in a good year, these guys make a bonus bigger than their annual pay. And he said, if anybody is screwing off, he said, the guys will get on that person. And if they don't listen, they'll demand that they get fired. And he said, I don't have to do anything. These guys are totally bought in. They love what they're doing. They love that they get the kind of income they get. And they're so dedicated to this company, it embarrasses me. So, a little bit I said to myself, this Lincoln Electric story is one worth holding on to. And I heard that story probably 40 years ago. But, I thought to myself, why can't we be like Lincoln Electric? And
so there are certain things that leaders do that become just like your grandpa did to you,
mm-hmm.
where it's 40 years it's been sticking in your head.
Yeah.
What are the little things that you have done to set the tempo to get that flywheel going so it actually does not need you to set and the tempo continuously?
Well, if you go the Socratic method, where you're asking people questions and then you lock in on what are their ideas and you turn them loose to do them, and when they work, they make a lot of money. It really doesn't take a big push from the leader. It kind of does it for itself. And when those guys see it happening, not once but several times, that flywheel starts spinning at a pretty beautiful rate. And it doesn't require a lot of energy from me to get that flywheel running, because the other guys are running much faster than I am. The other thing that I learned from my granddad is that if you run a company, and he had 20,000 employees, he's like, if you're at the center of the wheel, he said, if you turn just a very small amount, the people on the edge of the wheel are turning at a ridiculously fast rate. So he's like, be really careful that you're not overturning that wheel where people feel imbalanced and, completely uncomfortable because you're changing things so fast they can't keep up.
Ooh, so I like that a lot. Yeah.
I don't really change things a lot.
It's like that jet ski. It's like when you're tubing behind a jet ski and you pivot, and then you get them like swinging around like a slingshot.
Right. Well, the leader that is over churning and putting too much torque on the wheel causes a lot of headaches for employees. So I try to be very, very calm in the center of the wheel. I don't try to overturn it. I let the wheel turn kind of at the speed it wants to turn, and I try to oil it so it turns comfortably, but I don't try to be the guy that turns it.
You ever second guess this approach, or have you ever caught yourself in a predicament where like this, you might second guess this approach, or you might have to like go away from it? I'm just kind of curious if you ever had any self doubts about it.
No, if anything, as it works, you become more committed to it. And it works. So if anything, I feel like, why wasn't I more like this sooner?
Yeah, I could totally see that, Charlie. And like, and this is where, and going back to the second part that I was going to bring up, Billy, that you planted the seed with, is like the valuation, the deal structure and such. But it's like, it's so funny because if you take these variables, when I look inside of companies, there's so much correlation and cluster of the leadership style that you're talking about, Charlie. Mm-hmm. I'm assuming it's probably not as stressful to run the business like you're running compared to some of the other people I've met, where they're trying to hold everything together themselves. And then generally that leads to burnout, which generally leads to then a not so profitable business, which generally leads to then not a good valuation, which generally then leads to a larger degree of earnout. And then you have a boss who's telling you what to, it just spirals in the wrong direction versus the, like I said, it's exponentially the other direction based on how you're doing this. And so that, I don't know if you want to tee that up to you, Billy, of like how that manifests in more kind of the stuff that you were talking about.
Well, it's the owners and the management teams that understand that it's actually simpler than the consultants and the business schools and things would actually have you think about, and the management teams that don't really compare themselves to competitors, but are more like, okay, well, how can we be the best in each category? Those are the ones that end up really succeeding, because it's just, okay, well, yes, like Charlie, to your point, like something that you had me do was, kind of look at the different kind of raise elements that people are getting in industry. But that was only from a standpoint so that you could continue to be the best and to continue to, pay people more than they can get anywhere else, rather than trying to figure out, what's the lowest cost, or it's.
Well, on that, let me pull that thread for a second. So Charlie and Billy, like, there's this concept that I'm constantly beating the drum of like a lifestyle business. And my definition is, and my dad and I had a lifestyle business with 20 million, suck the cash out. We were solving for K1s. And a lot of entrepreneurs do that. And I don't think a lot of people do it on purpose, but I will say that it was our lack of understanding of what created value in the business. So it was like, we're trying to optimize for the cash flow for the household, because that we didn't understand what would create an asset. And so like that I think that concept, even though I think people might have a desire to lead like you are, like invest in the people, which will grow the asset. Bill, you and I could probably talk about that for days, but we didn't know that. So we were always kind of toying around with our head of like, we should do that because it makes sense, but then it's eating up our cash and therefore we don't understand how value creates. So there's kind of this weird catch-22 that we always caught ourselves in. So I'm curious, like when you think, Billy, when you're going in there and looking at companies, I mean, like how this, I'm trying to think, I mean, like it's like how obvious it's almost binary. I don't know if it is binary, but it's such a small gray, because you're either leading like what Charlie's explaining, or it's almost like you're not. I mean, do you see gray area or?
So there really isn't a gray area, because it really has to do with psychology. And what I generally see in folks like Charlie that aren't present in others is there's a core. Some people are much more wired to, with the same expected value, to really favor not losing versus chance to gain. And the reality is that unless you're willing to be in that chance to gain bucket, given the same expected value outcome, your growth rate's always going to be capped. When doing this uncertain math around, okay, well, yeah, but I have a company now and like our pay is at parity and like we're doing like all this stuff, it's kind of like every other company. How do I get from that to kind of what Charlie's talking about,
Right. Right.
There's not so much of a blueprint for that. And one of the reasons is that, so few companies do it. And when you're doing this uncertain math, everyone unconsciously weighs what they have more than what they can become. Especially when, people putting food on the tables on the line, people's retirements on the line, you have employees, this, that, and the other. And like, that's a big decision to make. But at the end of the day, because what we're talking about is people, just like in one-to-one relationships, your relationships with your business and the people within it are organic. You can't grow a one-to-one relationship without adding vulnerability that improves trust.
Yeah, I think that last word that you just said is so damn crucial here. And honestly, Charlie, I'm just like, our conversation, I've known you now for 50 minutes, and your demeanor and everything, you radiate. Is that the right word? Radiate trust and confidence and stability. And I think that is getting there. I think about like myself over my journey and just people I know. It's like people, like, to Bill, your point, how do you get there? Like standing on the confidence, knowing that like this is the right approach. It's like this leap of faith. And what I'm seeing right now and how that's being manifested, kind of when Billy and I were talking, is like hey, come back. And it's the culture that is now hybrid and a remote. And it's like really what we're seeing. And this is what I'm interpreting. And this is only my words, is like, I watch all these Wall Street Journal articles or wherever, and it's like, well, it's because the bosses suck. Like, and I know it's not that general, but it's like there has to be a common sense and like trust and respect that is wrapped around this, because these aren't that crazy of problems, but like for some reason everybody's misaligned. But again, my point is like you radiate trust and respect and stability, and I'm assuming you listen. Which it's amazing what kind of goodwill that brings, but what's the blueprint to say, hey, I got to get there or have a transformation over the culture or my leadership style? Any thoughts about like how that evolution?
Sure.
Go ahead, Charlie.
Oh, go ahead. So for me, it's about getting the right team in place. And we started, bootstrapping with very little assets. So you kind of have to say to yourself, if I want to grow the business, I got to get players that are capable of taking the business much farther than it is today. And you have to be willing to take that gamble that Billy's talking about and hire people that really are all-star players, even though you almost can't afford them. And I guess if I've learned anything, the best players will produce 2 to 3 times the output that average players produce.
So true.
80-20.
So you got to take that leap and say, I'm going to try this. And then when you get that boost in performance, now you hire the next person like that. And then when you get that boost in performance, you hire the next person like that. And in 5 or 10 years, you can put together an all-star team, and all of a sudden it just lights up and goes. And it's fabulous. But you got to have enough confidence to say, I'm going to hire an all-star player who's probably smarter than I am, that has proven past performance to demonstrate that they are an all-star player. And you give them the environment that makes them comfortable to be them. You can't micromanage an all-star player, because if you do, they hate life and they're looking for a job tomorrow. So you have to give them, plenty of rope to climb the hill. In the worst case, they hang themselves, but give them the rope to figure out which it is, and let them have some room to do their thing.
What are the non-negotiables for you, Charlie? Like where someone like does something, and because I feel like you'll let a lot of rope out, but I feel like just talking to you, you've got some things that are like absolutely on the no list.
I have probably 2 non-negotiables. And obviously everybody has the lying, cheating, 10 commandments kind of non-negotiables. But beyond that, To me, don't surprise me. I don't want to learn something bad that you knew about from other people that you should have told me about. So don't ever let that happen. I want to be the first to know, not the last to know if there's a problem. And if you tell me, we're going to work together to solve it, I'm not going to chop your head off. Now, if I find out about it, that you've hid it from me, you're not going to stay. We're done. So that's the first non-negotiable. The second non-negotiable for me, which is probably the only other one, is don't become an in-company politician.
I love it. You know what's so funny?
You know?
I was gonna say I was trying to use your Socratic method, and I was just asking you questions. But I was gonna say, I bet you don't deal with any drama bullshit. Like I bet you
None, zero.
That's what I look at your face. I like absolutely none, zero. Like, and none. I don't feel like there's even any wiggle room in that comment.
No, there's no wiggle room, and everybody knows it. And you know, I tell people we're only going to get where we want to go if we all pull on the same side of the rope. So if I got anybody pulling on the other side of the rope, you don't get to stay.
That's awesome.
You know, maybe you slip, okay, but you better be pulling on the same side of the rope as everybody else. So those are really my only non-negotiables.
Well, I think that's helpful because I mean, I think I got twin 6.5-year-old girls, Charlie. So like, I'm trying to do that kind of stuff where it's like, hey, here are the non-negotiables, but there's room to play inside the boundaries.
Right.
It's hard, really hard, but
so let me add, because since you talked about raising kids, I've got two. The younger of the two is graduating from college, and they're wonderful kids. So I think that as a leader or parent, and running a company is not that different from being a parent. You want to give people a fence that says we're going to stay inside this fence, and we're not going to go outside this fence. And as people achieve and trust grows, the fence area grows. So as a leader, your job is to keep people in the fence, but to constantly expand the fence. So there's more and more room. But it has to be earned. People have to earn that, growth of the fence.
When you're probably
you want to do that for your kids and your employees.
And you're probably just making sure that, like, to use the metaphor, or keep on the metaphor, keep the play going, right? The play is the game.
Absolutely.
Right? And you want to make sure that everybody's having fun because they know where the boundaries are.
Amen.
That's awesome.
And then the other thing is you want people, I watched, Billy's a basketball player. I don't know if you know that, but I've watched a lot of professional basketball, and teams that have someone that holds the ball lose. The good teams have very rapid ball movement, and it creates an open shot because if the ball's moving in the right kind of way, it gets the defense off balance. You get an open shot, and boom, you go. So I don't like employees that hold the ball. It's like if you got something, get it done. Let's move to the next thing. Don't be the sticky part of the team where the ball's not moving properly.
I love it.
So, I encourage that, but that's not pushing an idea. It's pushing a process.
Mm-hmm. Ooh, I like
that. And I don't mind pushing a process. But it's like, don't be a ball hog. Don't sit on something to where you're stopping the whole company. Keep things moving, keep the energy going. And they love it once they see it in practice. You don't have to keep singing that song.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. And Billy, you had your hand up. So
I'm just going to go through a few things here. So one of the things that it's critical to understand is that the process of going from wherever you are to whatever kind of leadership or company or culture style, it's iterative. And I'll explain why. Is because, if you're creating this mentality, and if you're, if to Charlie's point, if you're saying, you want to hire these all-star players and, you want to pay them, more than they can get anywhere else, that creates a dynamic where you can very effectively be slow to hire and quick to fire, because now you aren't dealing with the same employee pool as all your competitors.
Well, and
you're getting access to a different level of talent and a different level of commitment than other people. So it's actually not, there are silver linings in like kind of taking this leap. The other aspects are, no offense to you, Charlie, but I think the best run organization in the world is Bridgewater Associates, Ray Dalio's firm. His book Principles, it has a lot of what Charlie's saying in it. And if you want to go even deeper than that, like into some serious, transparent like management styles, you should read that book.
Idea I can never say it. Idea meritocracy or whatever that.
Yeah, an idea meritocracy. And Ray Dalio, who is a multi-billionaire, one of the largest, one of the biggest and wealthiest people in the country, starts that book off by saying, "I'm a dumb shit." So it's also from the standpoint of, don't necessarily just take it from Charlie that this stuff works. Look at, tech has been extremely successful. Look at Google, look at Facebook, look at all these places. Look at a guy like Chamath Palihapitiya, who got to be close to a billionaire status just because of his Facebook shares. And look at, why were, back in the day, investment bankers called the masters of the universe? Why are the private equity guys, paid so much? And why is private equity like taking over? Look at all of these instances. What do they all share in common? Ownership, not maybe just in mentality, but also in the form of, compensation. And they pay people more than they can get anywhere else. It's pretty common amongst like all of these giant, like the titans, the titanic industries that have, risen in America, all have that in common.
Well, and in my experience is like, it's just, Charlie, I couldn't agree with you more. Where like you're hiring one at a time. And to your point, Billy, like when we upped our pay of our team before we sold, I mean, I'm going to make up these numbers to get the point across. But let's say, on 115 employees, we paid our executive team prior to our evolution, like 90 grand. And guess what we got for that? Right? Everybody's probably, and there's been a lot of inflation. That was 10 years ago. But like, then all of a sudden when we sold, they're like, call it $125 plus bonus or more, or whatever the heck it was, call it, 200s in with different things. And it's like, there's no words to describe the difference of my responsibilities afterwards because of what was involved. And what's interesting, I want to hear your comment, Charlie, of like when I heard the first one, because like I was like, our management team's doing pretty damn well. And then all of a sudden I hired Paul Rahowski, who was my CIO. I'm like, the relativity, it was like, holy shit. Now I can see it was like he immediately, there was a different calibration, like the measurement stick got different. And so I was curious on like how you see that evolution. If you hire the one rock star and then now you have a different gauge of how everybody else is and how you kind of keep that healthy leveling up of everybody.
Well, I think talent builds momentum, so if Tom Brady suddenly becomes your quarterback, your level of commitment to the team is probably very different than if it's Baker Mayfield, Mm-hmm. So people, when they see talent, want to aspire to be like them. Or in some cases, it makes people turtle, mm-hmm. where they're like, I can never be like that. So, I need to get out of here. Mm-hmm. Things are changing. So, you generate those two responses where people either say, I got to up my game, or, not surprisingly, some people are like, things are changing and I don't think I'm going to make it in this new deal. And you have some people mm-hmm. that parachute out, and you get the right people parachuting out. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But that's all natural, doesn't really require a lot of movement from the leader. It's, you bring better people in and people start sorting themselves out as to whether they want to, rise to the new level or whether they want to go find somewhere easier to work.
Yep. Makes it, I would agree from my experience as well. And as we're kind of rounding up here, I'm curious on what your thoughts are on the long-term ownership of your business, because I'll give you some context, Charlie and Billy. I want maybe both of your guys' thoughts on this is because like in our training program, Charlie, we talk about like valuations, deal structures, different ways people can exit for like ESOPs, private equity, internal, third party, doesn't matter. Essentially all I want for everybody, Charlie, is just for them to get what they want, but I help them clarify it. And then it's like, hey, here's the trade-offs. So it's very similar to what you're saying. Like I will never tell anybody what to do. It's like, here's what you want. Here's your trade-offs. I don't care. But like one of the things that I think is a challenge for people that have a wonderful culture, which I can imagine that you do. You have a cohesive culture. You've got a cohesive and wonderful business. How to monetize that, but to keep that intact. And I see ESOPs pop up a lot, and all the different, there's varying flavors of private equity that might be able to accomplish that, but it's harder when you have built something like I call it an organism. What you've probably got is like there's an ecosystem that's living and breathing. That's not just a 3-statement financial report, right? So I'm curious, when you think about the future, what do you want for the business long term?
Well, this is really central to what Billy and I talk about. I'd be very comfortable if it ends in an ESOP, because we have a great team. I'm very proud of them. They're very dedicated and they're capable of running the business, the team I have are probably 20 plus years younger than I am. So, they have a lot of ahead of them in their careers. So, if they could be the buyer of the company as an ESOP, I think that would be a home run. I'm telling them that if that's the exit they want, we have some work to do, and they're responding to that.
I love that. That's so cool.
Yeah. So, but one way or the other, Billy and I are working together to figure out how to engineer the most valuable company out of what we've got. And, I'll just give you a quick, last year we had 26% revenue growth and 4% gross margin growth. And, Billy, keep doing that. If you can continue to hold at the 40% level, and we have about 20 million in sales and about 20 employees.
Wow, good for you.
Yeah, if you can keep growing your total revenues and improving your gross margins, things are going to look very nice for you, my friend.
I just got done. Just got done interviewing. It'll be depends on when this comes out, but I just got done interviewing Casey Brown. She's a pricing specialist. She just suggested doing exactly what you guys are talking about. Have you ever seen her speak? She speaks to Visage, I think.
I have not heard her yet.
So like, and then, where's I going with that? So anything, because Billy, in our prep call, you were talking about some of the kind of this more concrete numbers of like longevity, but like Charlie, anything that you're willing to share as far as like tenure of employees or growth or anything to make this concrete for people? Because there's a book back there, Conscious Capitalism, and I love that. It's like my Bible. Okay. And they have, hey, like, by the way, there's all these great things. And by the way, it's also, even if you're the most greedy human being, this is still probably the way to go. And I feel like that's probably going to be the case. I'm just curious if like tenure of employee, any kind of stats that you're willing to share of like the success that you're having?
Well, we have roughly 20 employees. So we have a handful of engineers. The engineers, the most senior is, he's probably been with the company close to 10 years. He's 40 years old. He's our COO. He has an MBA. He's got a master's in blast mechanics. And he's a professional engineer. His brother runs our shop, which we didn't have a shop. So I learned from having a shop, you don't want to have a shop. So we actually did close to $25 million of revenue with 5 employees by sourcing everything out, not doing anything ourselves other than manage the project and manage the product development. And we did that with 5 people. But, when I brought Adam in, he's like, we're losing a lot of margin by farming some things out that we could do ourselves. And we could, if we had the machinery, we had the shop, we could, expand our margins and do it better. So I challenged him to say, okay, let's not build the shop bigger than we know we could fill every day with work. So let's have a small shop and let's hire the best people. And we're in Charlotte, and Charlotte is, where a lot of race teams are headquartered. And, if you're looking at metal fabrication, the guys that do it for the race teams are like the best of breed. Those guys, like, the smallest difference is life or
No
death
kidding.
to a race team. So our guys have that level of craftsmanship. So when our product goes out the door, it looks so much better than our competitors. It's ridiculous. And also, those guys can put out a lot of work pretty quickly if they're excited about what they're doing. So, in our shop is only maybe, we built it right before COVID. So we're probably approaching 5 years. And we have just seen the margins out of that shop soar. We put, wonderful equipment in it. We keep buying better and faster and, cleaner and more precision equipment in. And those guys treat it like gold. And, it just really has built an engine that allows us to move our margins up, stay competitive, not have to raise prices too much, and really give the customer an amazing product. And then if you couple that with really smart young engineers who are constantly figuring out with the manufacturing people, how can we make your job easier? What can we change in the design to where the fit and finish will come together better, easier, cleaner? So, and really it's those race team guys, they're constantly looking for a way to make something a tiny bit better.
That's awesome.
So we have guys with that mindset, and we have engineers with that mindset, and they're constantly working together to make things more precise, cleaner to build, stronger engineering. And then we use outside engineers who have these massive supercomputers to be sure that our designs have the integrity to withstand the customer needs.
Awesome.
So it's kind of a cool thing, but I like your flywheel deal, because we kind of have a flywheel working on that, where we're, when the one side is feeding the other side, and there's a lot of trust. And in fact, we put one of our engineers this year in the shop, so he's actually working hand in glove with those guys. So, he's actually seeing it rather than just looking at a screen. So it's pretty cool.
I can just feel the pride of ownership. You know what I mean? Like I have a visceral feeling against that. Not visceral. Is that the right word? Like it's a very real feeling of goodness based on pride of ownership that I'm assuming your team has. It's
they do. Yeah. Again, we're back to I'm almost not needed. I've got this thing going where people are working together and they're very committed, and they're seeing, more money to feed their family, and they know that as it gets better, their income gets better. And, they love that customers have, wonderful feedback to their products. And, we protect things. So our guys really love that what they're doing actually has that we're protecting
a need,
and facilities. So, that we're not just making some kind of stupid widget that really doesn't matter that much. So our guys have the feeling that what we do does matter. Which
Charlie,
helps grease it.
A lot of entrepreneurs and founders that we stumble across, their identity is super tied into what they do. As your mantra of I don't want to be needed. And by the way, I also will second that. That's kind of my main strive as well. But like, where do you find your identity as you're constantly decoupling yourself with the business?
Where do I find my identity? Well, I'm a family person. One of the most profound things I ever saw was I lived with my grandparents right after my granddad retired for a year, right out of college. 1 year, I went to all of his parties. And I was like the 120-year-old with a bunch of 60 to 70-year-olds who were almost all CEOs or, presidents of banks or president of law firms, managing partners, etc. And the thing that I noticed is the first sentence is, hi, Ryan, how are you doing? And you answer. The second question is, how's your family? Right? And what I learned is people are only as happy as their most unhappy kid.
Wow, we could just mic drop and shut off the podcast on that one.
Ryan, I'm telling you, man, he can go all day with these nuggets.
Yeah, that's amen to that.
So, so my identity is in supporting my family, in motivating my family, enjoying my family, and the other thing that really is super powerful. You've got 2 kids. I've got 2 kids. Maybe you have more than 2 kids.
I hope not. I only know of 2.
All right, so let's go. So we share 2. The power of your believing in your kids and their knowing that you believe in them is massive. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of parents who are constantly telling their kids everything they're doing wrong. In my opinion, huge mistake. Be authentic and constantly tell them what they're doing right. Mm-hmm. And that will change everything. And you got to do that with your employees too. Find ways to praise them for things they're doing right. They can't be bullshit though. Mm-hmm. If you're praising them about something that's not great, they know it, and suddenly you're not credible. Mm-hmm. But figure out what is it they're doing great and make sure that you affirm it. And anybody who feels believed in by whoever it is that's, their parent, their boss, whatever, you want to set a fire, have them know that you believe in them.
I don't even have any rebuttal or anything to that. Just like, hey, that's what's so cool, Charlie, is first of all, again, hour and 10, 15 minutes. And I mean, I would already work for you. You know what I mean? And it's so interesting to watch that. And so my business partner, Matt Buskert, I've never had so it was my dad and I before, and boss, friend, fan. I mean, there were so many roles swirled into that, that soup that it was difficult to figure out which way was up anytime. But this, I've never worked for anybody essentially ever in my entire life.
Me too.
Yeah. And
I'm the same.
And so my partner, Matt Buskirk, you guys resemble each other quite a bit. Cause I would never have taken directions, and I'm like, Matt, I'll do whatever you want me to do, man. Seriously. And it's cause he just embodies everything you're saying. And it's I'm saying this because I am so impressed, and it's it's hard to describe from my perspective because I never experienced that before. And the people that might be listening in, whether they're the leader that wants to aspire to be this, or or it's someone listening that has a boss. I mean, I've never, other than experiencing it, I was like, well, supposedly people are like this, but when you find it, it's for me, honestly, when I was meeting Matt, I'm like, well, where's the skeletons? You know what I mean? Or where's the gotcha? Mm-hmm. And then when and that just embodies trust and release of anxiety and stress.
So in the last 12 years, we have not had one person leave because they wanted to leave. 0.
Something's working.
And yeah, well, I mean, people love to be part of something that's winning, and people love to feel embraced and love to be empowered. So, if you give them a winning result, they see it in their paycheck, they're respected in their job, and they're challenged to get better, and they have the help to get better. People like that.
Sign me up, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's really not any more complicated than that. So That's what I do for what it's worth.
I love it.
So
this has been so fun, Billy.
Anyway.
I'm so appreciative of you setting this up, and Charlie, you delivered on the goods, whether you knew what was promised or not. So I
want to say for Billy, so Billy is moving deeply into the benefits business, which is 401k, and I don't know where else that's going to grow, but that's a big part too. We do a 5-4 match on 401k. We encourage people to do their 401ks, and Billy's going to help get a better return for them, which I'm excited about, and for me too, for that matter. And like our healthcare, for example, we do an HSA. We fund it 100% on our side to the max.
That's awesome.
So the max depends on your age and if you're married or not married. In my case, it's close to $9,000. So even if there's a welder who has a family, we're putting $9,000 day one, January 1st, into their 401k. I mean, their HSA, and their max deal is $5,000.
Yeah,
for their
putting
family.
$4,000 more at the beginning of the year than their deductible.
Correct. So they're going to have a zero cash health insurance, and then $4,000 to do dental insurance or pay for the dental themselves.
So important these days. I mean, it's so important.
Yeah. But it takes their anxiety out. If they see that they don't have to worry about their health care, that their 401k is growing, their bonuses are happening, they're empowered, they're embraced, they feel like they're in a family, and we listen to them.
What are you missing? What do you?
It's just being, if they feel respected, they're going to pay you back 10 times.
And to your point, Charlie, like the other things that do benefits, it's more just having these types of conversations. Like, what are, if I'm a big nature guy, so I kind of look at where's the nutrients in the soil or the benefits and the culture. Your people are only going to grow and contribute and give you so much of a harvest if you treat the soil. And it's just really digging in and helping business owners with the actual tough questions, and embracing that I've gotten to know all different kinds of people with all different kinds of styles, and just helping people explore that. Because I don't make money unless we're doing some sort of actual transaction, or if we're doing some sort of 401k management. I just find topics like these fascinating, and part of my business is to give and receive. So I'm all about planting seeds. So that's what I do.
Imagine.
And I'm constantly having discussions with Billy, really any smart people I can find, as to here's what we're doing. What do you think? If you talk to enough smart people and you listen and you have a little bit of common sense, you can learn so much from smart people. You don't have to come up with everything yourself. So,
there's going to be a lot of clips out of this, Charlie. I'm just going to grab my notes. I know we got to wrap up here. We got to wrap up here, but I can only imagine, there's this indication of leadership and the respect and trust that a leader has, where I can only feel Charlie, if I can only imagine if you looked at one of your employees and said, "I'm disappointed," I bet you they would turn into a ball of mush, which is way that shows that the respect and the leadership and all that stuff is there, because I wouldn't want to disappoint you based on this conversation. But that's that mutual trust and the shared vision and the just the collaboration. So I props to you, man. This has been so fun. So a couple questions to wrap up. I don't know, Billy, if this was I can't remember when you were actually on the show, but I asked everybody what the word intentional means, because I changed the name of the show 3 years ago or something like that. And I love the definitions that people have been given. So I don't know who we want to start with. Well, maybe start with you, Charlie, of what the word intentional means to you, and then we'll go to you, Billy.
Well, intentional is doing what you say you're going to do, and having deep-rooted judgment behind it. So to be intentional, first you have to have common sense and judgment, and then you have to have the impetus to make it happen.
I like it. How about you, Billy?
So to me, intentional, so there's certainly, the Webster's definition, which we can all look up. I like to look at intentional at a level deeper as not the book definition, but intentional to a set of principles. And that your intentionality to those principles and to the way that you want to treat others and that the way that you want to live your life can and will evolve over time, but that's the grounding factor, not the intention to necessarily do one thing or the other. But I think living with intentionality is to have those grounding principles. And I think that, that served Charlie well because of, principles of like, I need to talk to smart people about these things. I need to hire people that are smarter than me.
Don't pull on the other side of the rope and no drama. I heard that loud and clear, Charlie.
Absolutely.
What's the best place to find each of you guys? If you want to give, if company, best place, someone wanted to reach out, the company, LinkedIn, okay. You could say smoke signals, whatever your preference is.
You want to go first?
Yeah, I'm Bloomwood Capital. You can, find us via Google search or, happy to provide a link, if Brian wants to do that.
Yeah, we'll put the links in the show notes.
So we're Kontek Industries, which is Kontek. People want to put a C into it. There isn't one. So it's Kontek Industries. We're www.kontekindustries.com. My email is cbmerrill4@sbcglobal.net.
When's this
interesting? My first day, we had a totally insolvent company, and the prior CEO, who we had to let go, would hide from creditors. And I told the switchboard, listen, anybody that calls asking for me, put them through. Don't ask them one gating question. Just put them through. I'll talk to them. Right? So I still have that attitude as to, you put my cell phone. I don't care. Someone wants to talk to me. My cell phone is 573-380-6519. Call me if you have a reason to talk to me. I'll take your call. Even though I have RoboKiller, leave a voice message and I'll respond if it's something authentic. Anyway, so I just think being accessible is a big deal. So I appreciate
that. You guys, this has been fantastic. I have very much enjoyed this. Billy, thank you for setting this up. It's been awesome. Charlie, thank you for the time. I appreciate your stories, and thanks for doing what you're doing, man. I can only imagine how many lives you're changing with your employees, the the customers you're working with, the communities. It's been awesome.
Thanks for having us. Billy's a great partner. Happy to have him as a friend and counselor.
Goes both ways.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
All right. Thanks, Ryan.
You bet. Thanks, Ryan.
Thanks for tuning in for that conversation with Charlie and Billy.